where the moon lights.
An excellent day for an exorcism.
I'm your number one fan.
Hey up, how are we doing? This is all very, very strange and new and weird, and I've been so nervous about recording this. I don't know why, but hello, my name is Scary Zara Mary, and welcome to the first episode of Reyt Scary, a podcast delving into what exactly makes horror rate scary. And I'll explain that shortly for some of my American listeners, hopefully, who might not understand what rate is. But I basically thought I would use this first episode as a bit of a kick-off. So a little bit shorter than probably what I'm going to do in future. Basically introduce myself a little bit, give you an insight into who I am and also what to expect from the podcast. I am, like I said, very nervous, but also very excited to be doing this. This was on my New Year's resolution list, and each year I try to get ahead of my New Year's resolution rather than starting on the 1st of January. I try and start it in December instead, so that then I start the year successful. What a loser I am. And starting a podcast was my New Year's resolution, so I am glad to be doing this. So, a little bit about me, I guess. Who am I? I'm Zara, Scary Zara Mary, and I'm a horror fan. That sounds like the introduction to an AA meeting, but for horror fans. I live in Yorkshire, in England, and the name of this podcast, Reyt Scary, is Yorkshire slang. Rate means very. So, for anyone outside of Yorkshire, for anyone outside of England, the podcast name is Very Scary. So there you go. Like I said, I thought I'd better explain that because I'm mutuals with a number of people from the US and further afield, and I'm sure that's a bizarre word for them. So there you go. I'm not originally from Yorkshire, actually. I moved up from Somerset when I was little, but I've lived up here in Yorkshire most of my life. That's why I have a Yorkshire accent, but there is a little bit of Somerset that slips out, especially when I'm feeling a little bit nervous. So this might be a bit of my posh telephone accent. I'm sure my friends will tell me differently and say, no, you sound Yorkshire as anything. But yeah, I've been in Yorkshire most of my life. I've loved horror since I don't even know what age, really young. I was born in the 80s and raised in the 90s, so things like Count Duckula and the Addams Family and The Witches, Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, all of those kind of things were on TV, and they definitely had an influence on me, I would say. I don't know why they were so popular in the 90s. Like, what was going on in the 90s to have so many spooky things on TV? Seems quite bizarre on reflection. I don't know if that's the state of kids' TV now, because I don't watch it. So if anyone could tell me with kids if kids' TV is still as spooky now, that would be great. In terms of horror films though, so moving away from telly, I think the first horror film that I ever watched or saw a clip of was Jaws. So being somewhere on the spectrum, not officially, but definitely. I had an absolute obsession with sharks when I was little. I had posters, I had books, I had CD-ROMs, that's how old I am. And we had a family computer, again, that is showing my age. We had a family computer, and you used to be able to buy CD-ROMs of, I think it was Encyclopedia Britannica. And I was obsessed with sharks at this point. And so the first thing that I did when we got this CD-ROM of Encyclopedia Britannica was look up sharks so that then I could see, are there any other shark facts that I don't already know? And there was the clip from Jaws of Brody when he's chumming over the side of the boat, when the shark very first appears and emerges out of the water, and he staggers back and says, "We're going to need a bigger boat." I mean, I was already fascinated and terrified with sharks, but that clip made me absolutely jump out of my skin, and I was hooked. No, pardon the pun. And I begged my parents to let me watch Jaws. And they did. They let me. I think I was probably 9, 10, maybe a little tiny bit older. And I was so obsessed with it that after I'd seen it a number of times, I then thought it'd be really funny in my sick and twisted head to inflict that film on my on my younger sister, who is 6 years my junior. Hi, Molly, if you're listening. She would have been maybe 4. It sounds so terrible now, like making a 4-year-old watch Jaws. Hopefully she's not traumatized. I think she might have watched Jaws since, but I just remember the look on her face, and I was so confused because I loved Jaws and was fascinated by it and loved the feeling of being scared, and she burst into tears. So, yeah, I think that was probably a very early insight into the effects of horror on different people. But after that, I can't really remember many horror films that I watched early on, but there are 2 in particular from one evening. I did the usual thing of going to sleepovers with friends after school when you were like 10, 11, 12, staying up till midnight, eating snacks, and then putting on a horror film and seeing who's more scared than the other. And this one particular sleepover at a friend's house, we'd just finished watching Lost Boys, which I really enjoyed, but I thought it was more funny than it was scary, and I was complaining that I wanted something more scary. And my friend mentioned a film that her dad had. She'd been told not to watch it. Under any circumstances, do not watch it. But her parents were asleep, and we figured we'd put it on and no one would know. And that's what we did. So all 6 of us, like 5, 6 of us, got under the blankets, got some sweets, and put the film on. This forbidden film that we were never allowed to see. And while watching it, I glanced over at my friends, and they were not happy. Like, some of them weren't daring to look. One of them wanted to turn it off. And I just could not get enough. I was glued to the screen. I was terrified. It was creepy, it was haunting, it was visceral and disgusting. It did give me nightmares for months on end, but I watched it all, and I wanted to watch it again and again and again, and that film was The Exorcist. So I have no doubt at some point, a lot of people know me for The Exorcist. I'm surprised I'm not actually wearing an Exorcist t-shirt today. I've got a Reanimator one on. But I am sure at some point I will do an Exorcist episode. I mean, it'd be a bit wrong if I didn't, given it is my favourite film. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, I guess, and my background with horror. In terms of why I'm doing this, if you've come over from my social media, either my TikTok or my Instagram, then you'll know that I do post quite a lot of film reviews very regularly. I've done quite a few film festivals now, so remote coverage for different film festivals in the US predominantly. And I love doing that. It's great to see so many different new films, not even because it's ahead of release dates or anything like that, but it's just having that exposure to things that maybe I wouldn't necessarily choose to watch. But what I found with different social media sites is that because you have to stay under 2 or 3 minutes, it's quite restrictive, and I like to ramble. Like, I'm sure that has come across already during this recording. And I really wanted to delve into films and into the genre and into the different subgenres in a little bit more detail. And obviously you can't do that with other social media sites. So that's the main reason why I'm doing this, is basically so you can hear me prattle on. It's purely for selfish reasons. And if no one listens to it, then that is fine, because I'll have gotten some stuff off my chest. And if someone listens to it, then great. Please leave me a comment so then I can talk back to you about horror films. In terms of what to expect from, I suppose, my podcast and various different episodes, I'm launching this at, I suppose, a bit of an odd time of year. I think other people are probably going to be doing recommendations for Christmas, that sort of thing. If I get an idea in my brain, I have to do it, otherwise I'll never do it. Again, probably puts me somewhere on the spicy brain spectrum. And what I thought I would do for the rest of the year is to do this introductory episode, which is a shorter one, just so I can get used to recording and posting, and figuring out what on earth I'm doing, because it was an absolute scramble. I'm going to be honest. This is probably the most makeshift get-up you can possibly have. I'll do it behind the scenes at some point and you can see what I'm talking about. This is by no means a professional setup. And I am somewhat of a perfectionist, so it has absolutely killed me not being able to have a professional setup. But I thought for the next couple of episodes after this one, I am going to do a bit of a review of the year. It seems like it's been a pretty decent year for horror, actually, 2024, given it didn't get off to the best start, I would say. The start of the year with releases like Night Swim didn't give us too much hope, but it has gotten better as the year has gone on, and I want to be able to talk about that. So I'm going to be doing top and bottom films, horror films of the year, and I'm hoping that my bestie Rose, it's Rose Bish, is gonna join me for that, and we can compare notes, because a lot of the horror films that have released this year we've actually seen together. I'm sure I'll talk about this with Rose, but if you follow me on my socials, then you will have seen Rose a number of times. Not only do we do lots of spooky stuff together, but when we go to the cinema, we do something which we call tuppy tours. And that is basically where we each bring a Tupperware to the cinema, a Tupperware container, and fill it with snacks and sweets. And we do a tour of our Tupperware boxes, Tuppies, and give each other a rating each week whenever we go to the cinema. So I think if you follow my socials, you'll know Rose very well, and you'll know why I'm bringing her on for that episode. I am then going to do an episode on 2025 films I am most looking forward to and why. And then I am going to finish the year on an episode that is going to talk all about Gothic horror. My podcast as a whole, the idea behind it is to delve into the different subgenres within horror. So like Gothic horror, but also psychological horror, body horror, zombies, action, comedy, vampires, anything you can think of, really, like torture, splatter, analog, elevated, even though I hate that term. And I'm going to look at what exactly makes them Reyt scary, hence the name of the podcast. And within each of those genres, so we'll do an episode to kick off the subgenre, and looking at it as a whole. And then following that, I'll do 5 or 6 episodes delving into specific films from that subgenre. So for example, with Gothic horror, it's quite nicely timed with the release of Nosferatu. Over in the US, it releases on the 25th of December. You lucky sods. And in the UK, it is the 1st of January. So that's why I chose that particular subgenre to start with. I also want to dig into Crimson Peak. I want to look at the others, The Woman in Black, maybe Sleepy Hollow. So that gives you an idea, and there'll be a separate episode for each one of those films. And then along the way, as and when new films are released, then I'll do a bonus episode and do an in-depth spoiler review of those films. That's my plan. Seems like a good plan. We'll see if we can stick to it. I am very much a planner. I like to have things very set out, and so then I know what I'm doing. But whether I stick to that plan is an entirely different matter sometimes. So we shall see. And I'm putting this out there, hopefully, so that then people can hold me to account. I am going to be doing this mostly on my own. Although hopefully not all of the time. Like I mentioned, I've got Rose that's going to come and join me for the top and bottom films of the year. I have already reached out to a few people who I have so much love for and so much admiration, and they've very kindly agreed to join me for some episodes, which is lovely, and I'm very, very flattered that they want to support me in this. I will say, like, when I announced that I was going to be doing this podcast, I had so much love from people and so much support and excitement. A couple of people in particular, Chuck, my movie guy, from the Dark Screen Society, an incredible podcast. If you are not listening to it already, please go listen to it. You've got Gigi from Room for Scream, you've got Chuck, your movie guy, you've got Seth, according to Seth, and then you've also got Brian Fears Ghosts. They are an incredible bunch. They are one of my most listened to podcasts, and considering there's 4 of them on a podcast, they never talk over each other really. It's like listening in on a conversation. But Chuck in particular, I am close to, I have so much love for, and he has been nothing but supportive. I get a text every couple of days saying, I can't wait to hear the podcast. So hi Chuck, if you're listening. Another person who I have an awful lot of love and respect and admiration for is Darren from the Slaughtered Lamb podcast. He is, again, we've probably only spoken for the last 6 months or so, but he has been an enormous supporter of mine. I watch him and Frank on the Slaughtered Lamb podcast maybe every day because they have such a huge back catalogue of videos. Again, go follow them if you're not already. And they often join me via the power of Spotify in the car when I'm doing long car journeys. So thank you, Darren, for your support on that. So yes, I feel very lucky that I've got those people that are rooting me on. And there's so many others as well that, Sam Celebro, Sam from Horror Halloween and Home, Shah, Emily, Suzanne, Rose, my sister Molly, my husband William. I know I'll have missed people, but thank you so much for the encouragement to actually get me up and running, because I'm not a very confident person, despite what it might appear online. I've been very nervous about doing this, and just having that encouragement means an awful lot to me, and is the whole reason why I'm sat here recording this now. So it's your fault that I'm doing this. If anyone's got a problem, you can blame them lot. So, like I said, I've got a schedule. My schedule isn't completely set in stone. So if you have a particular film, knowing that Gothic horror is coming up, if there's a particular film within that subgenre that you want me to delve into, please let me know. I'll do a little post on socials about some of the other subgenres, and again, if there's a specific film that you would like me to dig into, or if you've got views on the subgenre, please just let me know. My brain doesn't work in a really regimented, scheduled way, so I would much rather flex to what people want rather than setting a schedule and going completely off on a tangent, which is very likely. So yeah, just I'll include a link to my socials, and if you want to drop a comment there, you are most welcome, and I'll talk back to you as well. Speaking of socials, actually, I'm gonna have to get used to doing this whole like plugging my socials thing because I'm not very used to it in like an audio format. Normally I just drop a link into places, but I do have various different social channels where you can follow me. So there is Reyt Scary on both Instagram and YouTube. Or there is Scary Zara Mary on pretty much any other social media platform that you can think of. So Instagram, TikTok, they're my two main accounts. But I'm also on Threads and Blue Sky as well. So please feel free to come over and see what I'm doing on there. It would mean the world to me if you could like and subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube or if you are listening on your podcast player, just drop a follow, please. And really cheekily, if you fancy leaving a 5-star review, it does help massively. And I would absolutely love you to come back next week when I release another episode. And then the last plug that I'm going to do, honest, because I feel really cheeky already, as if I haven't got enough on my plate. I did set myself 2 New Year's resolutions. The first one being to set up a podcast in some way, shape or form. The second one was going to be to launch a Patreon. So alongside the launch of this very first episode of the Reyt Scary podcast, there is also a Patreon which you can subscribe to. And on the Patreon, you'll find additional content relating to the podcast. I'm going to do a bonus episode each month that you can listen to. There will be some behind the scenes content that you can see. And it'll just give you an opportunity as well to actually shape and influence the type of stuff that I talk about on the podcast. If you do subscribe to be a Patreon, then you will get a shout out on the podcast as well. Right, that's enough of me being cheeky because I feel really rude talking about stuff like that, and it's so unnatural. Because honestly, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for the people that follow me on social media. Like, that is enough. And like I said earlier on, this is purely an outlet for me, really, to be able to ramble about stuff which I already feel like I've done for far too long, even just in this introduction episode, which was only going to be about 15 minutes long. So to then have people that might want to listen to that ramble just baffles me completely. I find it quite bizarre, but also very, very heartwarming. And it just goes to show that the horror community is the best place to be, the most welcoming. I have truly become my most authentic self since becoming a part of the horror community. Like, I've always been a part of the horror community, but openly, probably only in the last 4 years. And I have nothing but love the fact that I am able to create another space on the internet where I can chat about my favourite thing in the world, horror, and what makes it Reyt Scary. So if you've got this far, thank you so much for listening. If you don't get this far, I don't blame you. But I do hope to see you next week. Next week will be, like I said, a proper full episode talking about the top and bottom horror films of 2024. I think it's going to be quite interesting. I'm sure me and Rose will agree on a lot of stuff. We may even disagree on some stuff we have done before. But yeah, I'd love it if you could come back next week and join us for that. See you with this then. I'll see you next week.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
I'll be right back.
Game over. It's all for you.
Beware the moonlights.
An excellent day for an exorcism.
I'm your number 1 fan.